After a successful Kickstarter campaign, Cyberpunk detective thriller Gamedec has arrived in early access on PC, with a Nintendo Switch version planned for the future, all things going well. It's based on a series of novels by M.S. I don't know how to pronounce his name, I'm really sorry, but it means that there should be no shortage of content and stories to explore at least, and if the small taster we've had is anything to go by, it's not afraid to go to some pretty dark places. But how many players will be willing to go there with it? You know, I'm mildly surprised that it's taken this long for another game to step directly into the ring with Disco Elysium, but at first glance it would appear that Gamedec is doing just that. Using a similar viewpoint and a variety of unique-ish character progression systems, it styles you as a game detective in a cyberpunk world where people escape for hours or even days at a time into fully immersive video games. Although each of these games has its own set of clearly defined rules and regulations, there are nevertheless those who use them to commit crimes. Anything goes in the alternate world of Virtualium, and people can be tempted or coerced into doing things they wouldn't even consider in real life. Bribery, blackmail, extortion, identity theft, fraud, they're all crimes that could be committed inside games, not to mention good old-fashioned theft and murder. A Gamedec's job is to solve these crimes both inside and outside of Virtualium. The case presented in the demo is called Twisted and Perverted, which gives you an indication of what kind of virtual worlds we'll be exploring. It focuses on the teenage son of a sleazy businessman / criminal called Jeffrey Haggis, who has been trapped in Virtualium in an almost permanent state of arousal for 4 days. Unable to wake his son without risking permanent damage or trauma, Haggis has hired you to pull the lad out of whatever grimy hole he's got himself stuck in. Initially, you begin by choosing a background and form a profession for your game deck. Although these choices have futuristic names, they have practical applications that will serve you well in one way or another through the game. A glazier, for example, can erect and destroy firewalls and has extensive knowledge of hacking and virtual security, while a scalpel is a former real-world surgeon and a sleeve spent time as a physical enforcer. Throughout the cases, these classes help to unlock different routes through investigations and while exploring the world, as the game deck calls upon his expertise to make deductions and inform his questioning. Your main task is information gathering. The first thing you need to do is program the virtual assistant in your office, who will either be a male or female, the latter being a heavily sexualised Cortana lookalike obviously, who you then can choose to be intelligent, playful or flirtatious. What impact this stuff will have going forward I don't know, because it has zero bearing on events in the demo after leaving your apartment. Once you reach Haggis' penthouse suite, the investigation begins. You'll find his son Fredo still hooked up to the game using a state-of-the-art chair and suit designed to stimulate muscles, mitigate bodily waste, regulate temperature and emulate real-world feelings and experiences. Opposite is a hooker, also still wired up, who's been in Virtualium for 17 hours. Upon talking to Tommy, Fredo's friend, who's still waiting nervously in Haggis' office, you'll learn that the boys went into Virtualium looking for some excitement in a world called Paradise Beach, but were soon tempted by the no-limits thrills of Twisted and Perverted, a dark world through which the hooker, Starlet, was to be their guide. The first leg of the investigation involves talking to a non-compliant Haggis and communicating with Starlet inside Virtualium, whilst also trying to coax info out of Tommy. Some investigations are furnished with a slider that moves right or left based on whether or not you're getting through to the subject. If you can get them on side and push the slider all the way right, they'll open up, giving you clues and info that allow you to make deductions and further the investigation. You can attempt to wake Starlet and pull her out of the game, but failure to do so will leave her comatose. You can also hack secret compartments in Haggis' office or access his virtual safe and email accounts to dish up his dirt. You can even free his AI assistant if you're a glazier, which allows her to roam Virtualium forever. She might even help you out later. Once you have the information you need, you'll have no choice but to strap into Haggis' spare chair and go retrieve his son from Twisted and Perverted. Taking the form of a dingy network of back alleys, TMP features a bunch of fetishists hanging around on street corners. There's a guy looking for his wife, a dude who died in the real world while under and has lived in Twisted and Perverted ever since. There's even a prankster unicorn offering some weird pleasures and trolling everyone he can. To get the info you need, you'll often have to do jobs or favours for the NPCs first. The more questions you ask, the more deductions you'll unlock, which mark your route through the case and open up new lines of questioning. At present there's no voice dialogue, and while the writing is decent, it doesn't have the same level of quality as its closest rivals. It also may purely be down to this particular case, but the content in the demo is very sexually focused. Character portraits look straight out of a fetish club, catalogue, which is kind of the point I guess, but right now it's a little lacking in other atmosphere. There's also a lot of jargon to get your head around with terminology for the technology and all its various elements. The full game promises different player characters, or at least skins, and a branching changeable story that reacts to your choices. In the demo the path is a little bit more rigid, but whether there'll be an overarching story and how much bearing it'll have on each case remains to be seen. One cool element is how you can use the rules of Virtualium to your advantage. At one point we got stuck behind a burning car with no way over, but a handy mine in a dumpster killed us so we could respawn on the other side. Now the presence of the mine in the dumpster was a little bit contrived and overly convenient admittedly, but it was a decent example of how it will work. We've also yet to see how the world looks as a whole. Character interactions were limited in what I played, and most of the conversation was a little bit one note. I mean, everyone in Twisted and Perverted is pretty much that. Also, the end of the case had some pretty disturbing imagery which simply won't be easy for some players to watch, even if the level of detail isn't particularly high. Gamedec has the potential to be deep and replayable, but as it stands, it could struggle to find an audience. The writing isn't brilliant, but the world and concept are intriguing, and the possibilities afforded by Virtualium are many and varied. Some will be turned off by the content of Twisted and Perverted, others will see the funny side of horny unicorns and a guy who can't keep up with his sexually adventurous wife. But what more will come with the full release, we just don't know. What we do know for sure is that it won't be predictable, and that can only be a good thing. So what do you think? Does Gamedec have your attention? Is it something you'd be interested in checking out? Do let us know in the comments, and if you enjoyed this video please consider hitting like and subscribe, maybe tagging the bell icon too so you're kept up to date with every review, preview, podcast and video we post. We also have a Patreon with access to exclusive content and competitions, and of course our Discord, so you can tell us directly what you think of our ramblings. In the meantime, I've been McFraser for God is a Geek, and you guys have been lovely. Bye.